You know, it used to be difficult to decide what to cover in retro reviews, but not anymore. Now I just review whatever's been re-released lately. Be careful, Johnny Games Industry. You don't want to end up like Billy Film Industry, who now spends most of his time sitting on a gas mask hose so he can lounge about enjoying the smell of his own farts all day. Still, I shouldn't complain. At least we're playing an old game we know to be good and which otherwise would have been left in the abandoned storage unit of gaming history alongside composite cables and Jak and Daxter is an improvement on playing the latest AAA attempt to throw loot boxes at the skulls of gullible people in the hope that one of them will embed itself. So here's Okami HD, a re-release of a classic PS2 action-adventure game by the now-defunct Clover Studio themed around Japanese Shinto, and as with many polytheistic religions, the smallest amount of research into Shinto will make you wonder why Christianity has stuck around so long, when all the other religions were clearly having much more fun. For example, did you know that Amaterasu, the sun goddess, fell out with Tsukiyomi, the moon god, after Tsukiyomi got grossed out by the goddess of food literally pulling a feast out of her ass? That's not just interesting, that's pretty fucking relatable. More so than that loaves and fishes bullshit. In Okami, we play as Amaterasu, the sun goddess, in the aspect of a white wolf. I gotta say, irreverent as I am, sun worship has always made a lot of sense to me as a religion. At least you're worshipping something you know is there, and actually does stuff. And he can say things like, don't stare at God for too long or he'll dim your eyesight and then your parents will think you've been masturbating again. But I digress. Amaterasu returns to glorious Nippon because it's full of demons and she'd rather it not be full of demons. I suppose it's not the most complex plotting in the world, but we're in the land of standard heroic myth here. The kind of thing that can be told around a campfire to slab four-headed tribespeople for generations and eventually retitled The Legend of Zelda. So here comes the usual question for your retro re-release, what we academics call the Jenga problem. Does it hold up? Well, firstly, it's post-2000s and therefore to my crusty mind about as retro as what I had for breakfast this morning, so Okami is still highly regarded, but what you'll note about the rave reviews is that they always go off on one about the beautiful art and soundtrack, and don't seem to dwell much on how the game actually plays. Languid was a word that caught my eye from one review, which is about the nicest possible way of saying slow. It's not paced like a slug on wet concrete, it's languid. That wasn't premature ejaculation, that was biological time-saving. But get through the introduction, in which two characters establish the point to save the world from the naughty demons with about 9,000 text boxes that all slowly crawl onto the screen like an Irishman on New Year's Eve trying to walk across a parking lot, all accompanied by Banjo-Kazooie-esque procedural gibber dialogue, and you will know whether or not you can put up with it for the whole game. And hey, here's the good news, you can actually speed up the text display in some of the ensuing dialogue, just not all of it, because we're doing the Yakuza thing of drawing arbitrary distinctions between kinds of dialogue that I guess somehow makes sense if you're Japanese. The weird thing is, most of the time the game dialogue exhaustively clarifies and re-clarifies every next step on the rigidly fixed story progression, but every now and again it does the opposite and leaves you directionlessly flailing around the overworld sniffing your own doggy butt. Zelda is of course the best comparison. It's not a perfect one. Zelda has never had a special attack that lets you whittle on the enemy, much as that would have improved Skyward Sword, but it'll do. The not quite open world that unfolds as we acquire the sacred spanking paddles that open up areas blocked off by ancient stone buttocks, or in this case, celestial brush techniques, which brings us to the main gameplay gimmick of Okami, that you can pause at any time and draw little beards and moustaches on the enemies for a laugh, which is as annoying as ever with analog sticks, so just as well the most complex thing you ever need to do is draw a flat, horribly misshapen circle with a line on it to create a bomb. But even the simple drawings can be temperamental. If your elbow gets jogged by your starving, neglected child while you're trying to draw a line, then your attempted slash will fizzle out and you'll have to withhold another meal. In any other game, I'd consider the celestial brush to be a pace killer, having to pause the action and slowly drag your paintbrush across the screen like you're hungover and trying to lick crumbs off a breakfast tray. But this is a languid game, remember? Not slow, languid. That's not a urine stain on my trousers, it's a moisture concentration zone. And it's not like the celestial brush makes the combat any more annoying. Combat is a thing that ambushes you as you explore the overworld and holds you down so it can show you its holiday snaps. Some, if not most, enemies require celestial brush flappery to defeat, but even without that, the camera has a tendency to get bored and idly wander off while you're trying to gauge how close is close enough to actually hit the bastards, and the action tends to be constantly lousy with special effects. For some reason, it is considered important that flowers be constantly streaming out of our protagonist's bum. Better pack that in when Tsukiyomi's around, Amaterasu. You know what he's like with rectal miracles. And yet, the combat isn't particularly difficult either, so maybe it all balances out. It was something like 20 hours in before I was finally starting to feel challenged by it. Up to then, it had mostly been lots of running around in circles and people slapping their bums at me. Yeah, 20 hours, and that wasn't even close to finished. Okami is one of those games that feels like it's constantly bolting more stuff onto itself. You defeated the giant all-powerful embodiment of evil in a grand climactic battle. Kick-ass. Time to start on the giant all-powerful embodiment of evil next door. This was the PS2 era, of course, back before games were split between either 5-hour story campaigns a lot of people are just going to watch on YouTube, or 200 hours of grind because you really want to unlock Tracer's new leg warmers. And perhaps it's true that to dwell on the open quotes languidness of the pace or how the combat isn't quite as slick and satisfying as something designed by psychopaths to trigger your addiction receptors is missing the point. Does Okami hold up? I do think there are a lot of things wrong with it that it excuses by hiding behind the arty game label. Yeah, the jumping feels sticky and you need to run for about half a mile before you can start sprinting, by which point you'll probably already be out whatever you need to sprint to. But overall it offers the catharsis of a simple uplifting story with lively engaging characters that doesn't get as up itself as some games with a celestial theme. El Shaddai springs instantly to mind, and it never stops feeling like something lovingly devised with a specific intent, which the gameplay foibles may even be part of. The celestial brush is temperamental because we're dealing with the fickle whims of the gods, yeah, who might bestow you with their blessing but then again might turn into a swan and bugger you all night.